How sweet the sound that sings a rest. I'll be right back. Thank you.
October 12, 2012. Highland Heights, Kentucky, 11:47 p.m. A 21-year-old woman sits in a police interrogation room. She has just admitted to killing her boyfriend. 6 bullets. His own gun. She says it was self-defense.
Ma'am, I killed my boyfriend in self-defense.
Okay, where are you at?
I'm at 12 Meadow Lane, Highland Heights, Kentucky.
The detectives have stepped out. The camera keeps rolling. And what happens next will become one of the most analyzed moments in modern criminal history. She stands. She paces. And then, she begins to dance. She snaps her fingers. She hums a melody. And then, she says it out loud. I did it. Yes, I did it.
I did. Yes, I did. I can't believe I did that.
Shayna Hubers danced. She sang. She snapped her fingers and admitted what she had done. This is not a story about whether she did it. She told police herself. This is a story about why, about obsession, about rejection, and about what happens when someone decides that if they can't have the person they love, no one else will either. Highland Heights, Kentucky. Population, just under 7,000. A quiet suburb nestled across the Ohio River from Cincinnati, the kind of place where people wave at their neighbors, where young professionals buy their first homes, where nothing much happens. It's a bedroom community. Safe, unremarkable, the kind of town that doesn't make the news. Until October of 2012. That's when a 911 call came in from a young woman. Hysterical, crying, saying she had just shot her boyfriend. The caller was Shayna Michelle Hubers, 21 years old, a psychology student at the University of Kentucky. Dean's List, graduated cum laude, working on her master's degree. The man she said she killed, Ryan Carter Poston, 29 years old, an attorney, a graduate of Chase Law School, a man his friends described as charming, ambitious, and kind. On the surface, they seemed like a perfect match. Young, attractive, successful, the kind of couple that looked good together in photographs. But behind closed doors, something else was happening. A relationship that friends would later describe as volatile, obsessive, suffocating. And on that October night, whatever had been building between them finally reached its breaking point. Ryan Carter Poston was born on December 30th, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. The eldest child. The only son. 3 younger sisters who adored him. His parents divorced when he was young, but the family remained close. When his mother remarried, Ryan embraced his stepfather, Peter Carter, as a second father. He was the kind of kid who did everything right. Good grades. Good athlete. Popular, but not in a way that made people resent him. He had a way of making everyone feel included. His friend Matt Herron would later say, "He's the type of person that you want in your life. Not just a friend, but a loving son, a protective, adoring older brother." After graduating from Chase Law School, Ryan built a career as a self-employed attorney. He represented clients in personal injury cases. He played chess competitively. He bought his first condominium in Highland Heights, a modest place but his own. At 29, Ryan Poston had everything ahead of him, a career he enjoyed, friends who cared about him, a family that loved him deeply. And then he met a girl on Facebook. It was 2011. Ryan was 28. He had recently ended a long relationship with his girlfriend, Lauren Worley. They had lived together. They had talked about a future. But the relationship ran its course. Ryan was on the rebound, and that's when he came across the profile of Shayna Hubers. She was pretty. She was smart. She was a psychology student at the University of Kentucky, about 80 miles away in Lexington. Ryan added her as a friend, reportedly after stumbling across her spring break photos. They started talking, then texting, then meeting. And within weeks, what began as casual quickly became something else entirely. Shayna. Michelle Hubers grew up in Lexington, Kentucky. By all outward measures, she was exceptional. She graduated cum laude from the University of Kentucky. She was pursuing a master's degree in school counseling. She received countless awards for academic excellence and leadership. Teachers praised her intelligence. Friends marveled at her ambition. Her childhood friend Sarah Robinson would later say, "I thought she was close to genius in my opinion. I mean, she always was in AP classes, always getting A's in everything." But those same friends noticed something else about Shayna. A pattern that emerged whenever a relationship didn't go her way. Sarah Robinson recalled, "If a guy broke up with her, or if a guy just said they weren't interested in her, she would take it pretty hard. Crying and maybe a little screaming. She didn't really like to let things go." She didn't like to let things go. That observation would prove prophetic. When Shayna met Ryan, she was 20 years old. He was 28, established, successful, handsome, everything she wanted. And once she had him, she had no intention of ever letting go. Friends would later testify that Shayna sent Ryan dozens of texts a day, sometimes 50, sometimes 100. She showed up at his condo uninvited. She appeared at his workplace. She monitored his social media. And Ryan kept trying to pull away. But somehow, he always got pulled back in. His friend Tom Owadala explained, "He just wasn't able to. He was too nice, didn't want to hurt her feelings. Too nice, too kind, too unwilling to cause pain." It was the very quality that made Ryan Poston a good friend, a good brother, a good son. And it may have been what cost him his life. For 18 months, Ryan and Shayna dated on and off. The pattern was always the same. They would fight. Shayna would spiral. Ryan would try to end things. And then, somehow, they would end up back together. Friends watched with growing concern. They saw a woman who couldn't accept the word no, and a man who couldn't bring himself to say it firmly enough. Weeks before the shooting, Shayna wrote to a friend, "He says he is only with me because I make him feel so awful when I cry. My love has turned to hate. My love has turned to hate." She wrote those words weeks before the shooting, and prosecutors would later argue that those words revealed everything. But Shayna had a different story. She claimed Ryan was the abuser, that he was controlling, that he kept loaded guns in the house and had pulled them on her before. She told police, "He was throwing me around the room, like picking me up by my face." Investigators listened. They documented her claims. They photographed her body for signs of injury. They found minor discoloration on her thigh, some marks near her thumb that she herself said were birthmarks. And when they examined Ryan's condominium, they found something telling. Lieutenant David Fornash noted, "I examined the bookcase she said she had. Been thrown against. Nothing was knocked off the shelf. No signs of a struggle. No overturned furniture. No evidence of the violent confrontation Shayna described. Just a man's body on the dining room floor, 6 bullet wounds, and a woman who couldn't stop talking." October 12th, 2012, a Friday. Ryan Poston woke up that morning with plans. For weeks, he had been chatting online with a woman named Audrey Bolt. She was the reigning Miss Ohio USA, beautiful, accomplished. and she had agreed to meet him for drinks that night at a bar in Milford, Ohio. It was supposed to be their first date. Audrey would later recall, "We had been texting and chatting for months. I was really looking forward to meeting him." Ryan was excited. He told his stepfather about the date the day before, but he was nervous too, because he still hadn't told Shayna. His stepfather, Peter Carter, testified, "Ryan confided in me about the date with Audrey, and he was afraid to tell Shayna about it." That evening, Shayna showed up at Ryan's condominium. She wanted to see him. She wanted to talk. What happened next depends on who you believe. According to Shayna, an argument erupted. Ryan became violent. He grabbed her, threw her around, reached for his gun. She got to it first. She fired. She told police, "He was right in front of me and he reached down and grabbed the gun, and I grabbed it out of his hands and pulled the trigger." She pulled the trigger. Once. Then again. And again. 6 times. And then she waited. Investigators would later note that approximately 10 to 15 minutes passed between the shooting and when Shayna called 911. The dispatcher asked, "How long ago did this happen?" Shayna replied, "I don't know. 15 minutes. Not even that long." But before she called 911, she called her mother. On the 911 recording, Shayna sounds hysterical. "He beat me and tried to carry me out of the house, and I came back in to get my things."
He had put his arm across the table, and there's a lamp, and he had put his arm across the table and had it in my face and was screaming at me at the top of his lungs after he had thrown me around the room, and was saying emotionally to me, "You're a f***ing hillbilly. I f***ing hate you. I hate everything about you for what you are, and my family." And he was screaming it, and he had his hand on the table, and he wasn't completely standing up. He was like this. He was sitting, he was enough that when I shot him, he went like this. Literally. That's when I knew he was dead. Or close to it, and twitching. And I let him, I still, even though the hurt, I still, enough of me, loved him. But I couldn't stand to watch him twitch. I knew he was going to die or have a completely deformed face. He's very vain. One of our last conversations we had that was good was that he wants my best friend who's a dentist to do his veneers and wants to get a nose job. Just that kind of person. And I shot him right here. I gave him his nose job. He wanted. I broke it.
On the 911 recording, Shayna sounds hysterical. "He beat me and tried to carry me out of the house, and I came back in to get my things, and he was right in front of me. And he reached down and grabbed the gun, and I grabbed it out of his hand and pulled the trigger." The dispatcher asked, "Is he breathing?" "No, he's dead. He's dead." Lieutenant David Fornash was one of the first officers on the scene. He instructed Shayna to get on the ground. Then he entered the apartment. He would later testify, "As I entered the apartment, I saw Ryan Poston's body on the floor in the dining room, behind the dining room table. Ryan Poston lay on his back. He had been shot 6 times, twice in the head. The wounds told a story that would haunt proceedings for years to come. Shayna was taken into custody. She was read her Miranda rights. She asked for a lawyer. And then, she started talking anyway. For more than 2.5 hours, with the camera rolling, Shayna Hubers talked. She had asked for a lawyer, but she didn't wait for one. She told her story. She cried. She laughed. She made statements that would later be played for 2 different juries. She talked about the relationship, about Ryan's alleged abuse, about how he had called her names, thrown her around, made her feel worthless. "He was whacked on drugs," she said. "He called me a fucking hillbilly." She painted a picture of a woman at the end of her rope, a victim who finally fought back. But then she said something else, something that would change everything. The detectives asked Shayna to describe what happened, where she shot Ryan, how many times, and then she offered a detail that no one expected. "He's very vain," she said. "One of our last conversations we had that was good was that he wants to get a nose job, and I shot him right here." She pointed to the middle of her face. "I gave him his nose job he wanted. I broke it." Police Chief Bill Birkenhauer was watching the live feed from another room. He would later say, "My jaw dropped, you know? It was like, did she just really say that?" She gave him the nose job he wanted. A joke, a quip. Hours after putting 6 bullets into the man she claimed to love. But the detectives weren't done. They stepped out. They let the camera keep rolling. And what happened next would become the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. Left alone, most people would sit in silence. They would cry. They would stare at the walls. They would grapple with what they had just done. Shayna Hubers stood up. She began to pace. And then, she began to move in a way that looked almost like dancing. She pirouetted. She snapped her fingers. She hummed to herself. And then she began to sing Amazing Grace. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said it again. "I did it. Yes, I did it. I can't believe I did that." And then, almost as an afterthought, "I'm so good at acting. I'm so good at acting." Words spoken aloud to no one. Words captured by a camera she knew was there. Prosecutor Michelle Snodgrass would later say, "Within hours of putting 6 bullets into Ryan Poston and watching him die, she danced and sang. I've never heard that somebody pirouettes when they're in shock, that someone sings when they're in shock, that someone snaps their fingers and says, 'I did it,' when they're in shock." But she wasn't done. Over the hours that followed, Shayna made more statements. About her future, about jail, about marriage. "I don't know if anyone will ever want to marry me if they know that I killed a boyfriend in self-defense." Not funny. She laughed as she said it. She asked the officers bizarre questions. "If you go to jail, are you allowed to keep your phone? Can you shower there? Or do you just get really dirty? I have to shower in front of people? Oh, yeah." By the time the sun rose the next morning, Shayna Hubers had given investigators everything they needed, not through pressure, not through interrogation techniques, but through her own inability to stop talking. She was charged with murder. Bail was set at $3 million. She would remain in the Campbell County Jail for the next 2.5 years, waiting for her day in court. 2.5 years after the shooting, Shayna Hubers went on trial for murder. The prosecution, led by Campbell County Commonwealth's attorney Michelle Snodgrass, presented a case built on obsession, jealousy, and the defendant's own words. They played the text messages, dozens of them, sometimes 50 to 100 in a single day. They showed a woman who could not accept rejection, who tracked Ryan's every move, who showed up uninvited again and again. They called witnesses, Ryan's friends, his family, his stepfather, who testified about the date Ryan had planned with Audrey Bolt, the date he never got to keep. They called Audrey Bolt herself, the woman Ryan was supposed to meet that night. She testified, "He never showed up. I waited, then went home. I never heard from him again." And they called Shayna's former cellmate, Cecily Miller, a woman who had spent time with Shayna in the Campbell County Detention Center, a woman who had heard Shayna talk about what she had done. Miller testified, "She laughed about shooting him in the face and giving him the nose job he always wanted." Miller also testified that Shayna had discussed her legal strategy. She said she was going to plead insanity, but she was too smart because she has the IQ of Einstein. So she was going to plead battered wife syndrome. The defense maintained that Shayna was a victim of domestic abuse, that she had acted in fear for her life, that she had no choice but to defend herself against a man who had hurt her before. Shayna did not take the stand. Instead, the defense relied on the interrogation video, the same video where she claimed self-defense. But that video also contained the dancing, the singing, the nose job comment, the laughter. On April 23, 2015, after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty of murder. The jury recommended a sentence of 40 years. Shayna would be eligible for parole after 20 years. At sentencing, Judge Fred A. Stein called the killing one of the most cold-blooded acts he had seen in his career. But this story was not over. 1 year after her conviction, Shayna Hubers was granted a new trial. The reason? A juror had failed to disclose a felony conviction during jury selection. Under Kentucky law, felons cannot serve on juries. The entire trial was void. For Ryan Poston's family, the nightmare continued. Ryan's father, Jay Poston, said, "It was devastating. We had to go through it all over again." The evidence hadn't changed. The footage hadn't changed. The words she spoke, the dancing, the singing, the nose job comment, none of that had changed. But she would face a new jury, a new chance to tell her story. In August 2018, Shayna Hubers stood trial for the second time. She had a new defense attorney, David Eldridge, and this time she had a different strategy. The defense shifted its approach. Instead of pure self-defense, they argued extreme emotional disturbance, a legal defense under Kentucky law that can reduce a murder charge. A psychologist testified that Shayna suffered from borderline personality disorder, that at the moment she shot Ryan, her mental state was seriously abnormal. And this time, Shayna took the stand herself. She described the night of the shooting, the argument, the fear. She said Ryan had called her crazy, unstable. She said he pushed her down when she tried to stand. "I was hysterically crying," she testified. But under cross-examination, prosecutor Michelle Snodgrass pressed her on the inconsistencies. On the 911 call, she claimed not to remember. On the statements she made that night. Snodgrass asked, "You were concerned enough for Mr. Poston that you wanted to make sure he didn't have to live with a deformed face, weren't you?" Shayna replied, "I said that." On August 28, 2018, the second jury reached its verdict, guilty of murder. Again. This time, the sentence was life in prison, with parole. Eligibility after 20 years. Shayna Hubers would not be eligible for release until 2032. As Ryan's father left the courthouse, a reporter asked if he had anything to say to Shayna. "Rot in hell," he replied. "She is going where she deserves to be." Shayna Hubers is currently incarcerated at the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. In 2018, while awaiting her second trial, she married a fellow inmate in a brief jailhouse ceremony. The marriage lasted less than a year. She appealed her second conviction, arguing problems with jury selection, venue, and evidence. In September 2020, the Kentucky Supreme Court denied her appeal. She will be eligible for parole in 2032. She will be 39 years old. Ryan Carter Poston would have been 43 years old today. He would have seen his sisters marry, have children. He would have built a career, perhaps fallen in love again. Instead, he lies buried at St. John's Cemetery in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. Gone at 29, killed by a woman who said she loved him. This case asks us to consider the space between love and obsession, the moment when affection becomes possession, when attachment becomes control. Shayna Hubers could not accept rejection. She could not accept that Ryan Poston wanted to move on, that he had plans that didn't include her, that he was ready to start a new chapter. And so she made sure there would be no new chapter. Not for him. Not for anyone. The dancing in that room, what did it mean? Shock? Detachment? Relief? Only Shayna Hubers knows for certain. But we know what the jury saw. We know what the evidence showed. And we know that Ryan Poston deserved better than to die on his dining room floor on a Friday night in October. He was 29 years old. He was a lawyer. He was a son, a brother, a friend, and he never got to keep that date. Shayna Hubers is serving a life sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women. She will be eligible for parole in 2032. When you watched her dance in that room, what did you see? Grief, guilt, or something far more unsettling? Let us know in the comments below.